Good morning, students. I hope you're all doing well. Now, in our previous lecture, we had talked about the August offer followed by the individual satyagraha, and following that, we had talked about the Cripps proposal and its failure. The failure of the Cripps proposal set the stage for the next big development in the national movement, that is the Quit India movement of 1942. Right now, what do we have to see over here? The factors responsible for launching the Quit India movement, the mass activity and extent of participation. That means the various forms the movement took, what was the attitude of the masses, and to what extent were the masses participating in the movement. The British response, and finally the impact or significance of the movement, right? Beginning with the factors that were responsible. Now, the immediate circumstances for the Quit India movement were created by the failure of the Cripps proposal. The attitude of the government regarding the path of constitutional development in India had remained unchanged, and for the nationalists, including Mahatma Gandhi, it was clear that any further silence would be tantamount to cooperation with the British rule, and it would legitimize the British position that it had the unilateral right to decide India's future without consulting Indians. Right? So, this was one reason. Second was the rise of mass unrest due to price rise and shortages caused by the war, mass unrest due to the seizing of boats in Bengal and Odisha, thus gravely threatening the livelihood and even the lives of the people living in the coastal areas of Bengal and Odisha. The government had started to seize and confiscate all kinds of fishing boats because they were afraid that the Japanese might use them in order to launch an armed invasion of India. And thirdly, mass unrest due to the fear of the British adopting a scorched earth policy in Assam and Bengal in eastern India in order to slow down the Japanese advance into India through Burma. By 1942, by May of 1942, Burma had fallen along with the whole of Southeast Asia, and the Japanese were knocking on the doors of British India. The people of Eastern India felt that the British might adopt a scorched earth policy in order to slow down the British advance. So, scorched earth policy क्या होता है? As an army retreats, it seeks to slow down the advance of the enemy by destroying all the resources of that particular region in order to prevent the enemy from using those resources. So, in the case of Eastern India, it would involve things such as blowing up bridges, disrupting all the lines of communication, plucking out the railways, blocking the roads, along with the destruction of farmlands, the killing of farm animals, and even poisoning wells and blocking waterways which may be used by enemies for its logistical purposes, right? So this would definitely help the British in slowing down the Japanese army, but at the same time it would also virtually condemn the people living in these highly populated, densely populated regions to a certainty of death, right? So that is why mass unrest was high. Thirdly, the masses were beginning to feel that British Empire, the British Raj in India is on the verge of collapsing. So the imminent collapse of the British Empire emboldened those people who had been suffering under the British Empire for a long time. The public confidence in the stability of the British rule was so low that people had even started withdrawing their deposits from banks and post offices and the like, right? So they did not have faith either in the British ability to defend them against Japanese aggression, nor did they have faith in the British ability to suppress any determined opposition by Indians. And finally, the manner in which the British had evacuated from Southeast Asia as the Japanese had invaded it had also destroyed their prestige. What they had done was adopt a very racial attitude. The native subjects were left to their own devices in places such as Malay, Singapore, and Burma. That means they were not provided any assistance or protection against Japanese aggression. The white colonizers had been evacuated at the earliest priority through all the roads and the railways connecting India and Burma. And on the other hand, the Indians present in Burma, Malay, and Singapore had not been given the same kind of treatment. In fact, two roads leading out of Burma had been created, a black road for Indians and a white road for the British. Right now, Indians felt that the British are going to do a repeat performance of this in India if the Japanese were to invade. Right. So the manner of British retreat and evacuation not only destroyed the British prestige but also made it clear to Indians that in case of a Japanese aggression, Japanese invasion of India, the British are going to do the same thing to the Indians as they had done to the people of Burma or Malay or Singapore, right? And thus, the Congress leadership, primarily Mahatma Gandhi, was convinced that this was the best opportunity to launch a program of mass civil disobedience as a last ditch effort to force the British to quit India. Mahatma Gandhi called the Congress Working Committee for a meeting at his Wardha ashram, the Sevagram Satyagraha ashram at Wardha, on the 14th of July 1942. And here, the Congress Working Committee adopted the Quit India resolution, saying that if the British did not immediately transfer power to Indians and quit India, the Congress is going to launch a mass program of civil disobedience. However, this resolution was not so straightforward. It was controversial, leading to some leaders such as C. Rajgopalachari resigning from the Congress. He left the Congress. Why? Because Siraj Gopalachari was of the opinion that this was not the best opportunity, right moment to launch a mass movement. Instead, Indians must pledge full support to the British in hopes of British rewards to Indians in the form of transfer of power later on after the war. Jawaharlal Nehru and Maulana Azad were also apprehensive about launching this movement on both strategic as well as organizational grounds, right? So they also subscribed to Siraj Gopalachari's idea that at this point of time the British desperately needed India's support and would be grateful for it, and they would reward Indians after the war with complete independence. Further, they believed that the Congress organization was not yet powerful enough in order to sustain any mass program of civil disobedience. So they were not certain if the Congress would be able to maintain the necessary discipline needed for organized satyagraha. However, they let go of their apprehensions and ultimately sided with Mahatma Gandhi, who had given the call for quit India. So they were initially apprehensive, but relented ultimately. On the other hand, some other leaders, such as Mahatma Gandhi himself, along with Sardar Patel, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and Dr. Anugrah Narayan Sinha, enthusiastically supported the call for uh, quit India. Right? First of all, they believed that the time was right, and this was a golden opportunity for Indians to force the British to quit India because of the high degree of mass unrest and the almost panic state of the masses with respect to the stability of the government. Right? So they believe that this kind of an opportunity may not present itself in the near future, and that is why they wanted to launch the mass movement. Secondly, Mahatma Gandhi had become increasingly convinced that the British are not going to listen to Indian demands till they were forced to do so. For him, quit India was the last resort, right? So, for him, by this point of time, the British had been given many opportunities to accept Indian demands, but they had shown no inclination of being serious about it. And therefore, he launched the Quit India movement. So, they believed or they enthusiastically supported the call, right? And this Quit India resolution adopted by the Congress Working Committee at Wardha on the 14th of July 1942 became the basis for the Quit India resolution adopted by the All India Congress Committee on the 8th of August 1942 at the Golia Tank Maidan, later renamed as the Agast Kranti Maidan at Bombay. The Quit India resolution was endorsed by the AICC with some slight modifications, and it marked the official beginning of the Quit India movement. Mahatma Gandhi addressed the masses directly and gave them a mantra. Right? He said, I present to you a mantra, and you may imprint it on your hearts and give expression to it with your every breath. That mantra is do or die. And along with this, he also gave a set of directions to the people. Right? For example, to the peasants, he said that if the zamindars are patriotic, pay mutually agreed rent. If they are loyal to the government, do not pay rent. To the workers, he repeated the same advice. If the industrialists, if the factory owners are patriotic, do not strike. But if they are loyal to the government, go on strike. To the students, he said that if confident, leave your studies and participate in the movement. To the government employees, he said, do not resign from your positions, but switch your loyalties to the Congress. To the Indian princes, that means the ruler of the princely states, he said, uh, work in accordance with the wishes of the people and join the national movement, declare support for the Quit India movement, and will give the call for a free, united, and democratic India. To their subjects, that means the subjects of the princely rulers, he said that if your ruler is pro India and pro Congress, remain loyal and support him. If he is not, then rebel. Right? So these are the kinds of directions that he gave to the people. And along with that, he also urged non-violence. He gave the call for non-violence, right? But at the same time, he also added a caveat. He explained that violence may become necessary in some specific circumstances. That means in the more immediate sense, in order to defend one's life, property, and honor against violent offenders such as murderers or rapists. At the same time, he also said that the people are now going to decide the actual meaning of non-violence. So while he urged non-violence, he asked the people to act in accordance with their own conscience, and further he reassured them that he is not going to withdraw support for the movement when if and when it becomes violent. So everybody knew that the movement was going to be a violent one, and the British virtually ensured that it was going to be extremely violent with their actions. On the very next day, early morning of 9th August 1942, the British arrested Gandhiji along with all prominent Congress leaders such as Nehru, Patel, Maulana Azad, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, etc. The movement became leaderless and fell under the sway of radical and militant elements. Right? And thus, from the very beginning, an element of militancy was visible. The arrest of all the top Congress leaders turned them into martyrs in the eyes of the masses, and there was a great outpouring of public sympathy towards them. And this resulted in spontaneous protests, breaking out in all the major cities, including Bombay, Pune, Madras, Lucknow, Lahore, Delhi, right? So, Calcutta. So, across India, an urban spontaneous movement broke out. On the 11th of August, 1942, while some school children were trying to raise the tricolor flag atop the Patna Secretariat, they were shot at by the police, resulting in the deaths of 7 of them. So, 7 school children were shot dead. And following this, the movement spread like fire into the villages and became extremely violent. Movement became violent and spread to the villages across Bihar, UP, Bengal, central provinces, and Maharashtra. And it would remain out of control for several months. The army was called in, resulting in almost 1 lakh arrests. The violence claimed the lives of at least 22,000 Indians and roughly an equal number of loyalist forces, that means army men and British officials. So it was extremely violent on both sides, and the movement remained out of control for several months before it could be brought under control. But this did not mean that the movement came to a complete halt. Following the mass phase of the movement, the underground activity started. Ram Manohar Lohia in the forests along the UP, Bihar, and Nepal border. Jay Prakash Narayan in the forests surrounding the UP, Bihar, and Nepal border began an underground revolutionary outfit called the Azad Dasta, which launched a guerrilla campaign in order to subvert British rule in India. They conducted activities such as making and blasting bombs, blowing up bridges, disrupting lines of communication, attacking top British officials, and breaking jails in order to liberate imprisoned Indians. Right. Similar activities were carried out by Ram Manohar Lohia in North India in the region of Delhi, Haryana, Punjab belt. Right. He was assisted by some other Congress leaders, some younger, lesser known Congress leaders. Similar activities were also visible in the region of Bombay, in the Bombay presidency, in the region of Maharashtra. And a young college student, female college student, Usha Mehta, launched a secret radio in order to not only enthuse the people with the message of patriotism, but also give reports to the people with regards to various important revolutionary activity that was going on. She urged the people to support the Congress and the other anti-British forces. Further, we also witnessed the creation of several parallel governments in places such as Balia in UP, Satara in Maharashtra, and Tamluk in West Bengal. With the disappearance of British administration, the Congress, its leaders and its workers organized their own parallel governments to run the local administration. They conducted works such as giving us relief during cyclone in the case of Tamluk in West Bengal, in creating courts of arbitration to settle disputes, by bringing about social reform, that is in Maharashtra, the Prati Sarkar of YV Chavan started to conduct what were known as Gandhi marriages, which would involve both intercaste marriages as well as marriages without any exchange of money, without dowry, right? So parallel governments were also set up. So this is how the movement started and spread, and we have also seen how it took various forms as the movement progressed, beginning with the cities and then a violent movement in the villages, leading to underground activity and the setting up of parallel governments. Right? And these were the factors that were behind it. So let us first write this down and then we shall continue. Give the heading Quit India Movement, and under that you can write factors. लिखो. The Quit India resolution, the Quit India resolution was first adopted by the Congress Working Committee after consultation with Mahatma Gandhi at his Sevagram Satyagrah Ashram Wardha on the 14th of July 1942. On the 14th of July 1942. Full stop. It called for the British to transfer power to Indians immediately. And quit India. It called upon the British to transfer power to Indians immediately and quit India. Full stop. Failing this, comma, the Congress would launch a program of mass civil disobedience. In order to attain the same. Full stop. Next point. Next main point. However, not all Congress leaders, agreed with this proposition. Full stop. Subpoint. Prominent leaders such as C. Rajgopalachari, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Maulana Azad, such as C. Rajgopalachari, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Maulana Azad, felt that the better option would be to wholeheartedly support the British in repelling the future Japanese invasion, and in return, the grateful British would reward Indians by accepting their demands. Full stop. Next sub point. Further, they believed that the Congress organization was not strong enough to sustain any mass movement in a disciplined manner. Next sub point. Lastly, they felt that the Japanese were the worst oppressors than the British. And thus, it was in the interests of Indians to help the British resist them. ठीक है? Next main point लिखो. On the other hand, Mahatma Gandhi received unequal and enthusiastic support of other leaders such as Sardar Patel, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and Dr. Anugrah Narayan Sinha, such as Sardar Patel, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and Dr. Anugrah Narayan Sinha. In his call of quit India. Full stop. Subpoint. Mahatma Gandhi had decided to give the call for quit India at a time when severe British repression, when severe British repression was a guarantee, when severe British repression was a guarantee due to the following factors. Due to the following factors. 1, 2, 3, 4 करके लिख सकते हैं. Number 1, the failure of the Cripps mission. Failure of the Cripps mission had exposed the unchanged attitude of the British with regards to constitutional advance, and had made it clear that any further silence would be tantamount to accepting that the British had the right to unilaterally determine India's future. That the British had the right to unilaterally determine India's future without consulting Indians. Number 2, there was a great degree of public unrest. Due to A, B, and C. A, price rise and shortages of essential commodities such as food grains, sugar, salt, and cloth caused by a strict regime of rationing and diversion of supplies towards the war effort by the British. Full stop. The British had started forcibly confiscating rice surpluses from the poor farmers of Bengal and Odisha in order to supply the Australian, British, and American troops in Indonesia and Burma. Full stop. Food shortage in East India was quickly reaching a critical point making making a major famine, making a major famine unavoidable, the major famine unavoidable. And this famine took place, also known as the Great Bengal Famine of 1943. And the blame can solely be placed on the shoulders of Churchill and his military officials in India. Right? So this was one thing. B likho. B. The seizing of fishing boats. The seizing of fishing boats in Bengal and Odisha. In Bengal and Odisha by the British. By the British threatened the livelihoods and lives, the livelihoods and lives of the poor and populous coastal communities of this region, of this region. Full stop. The British had done this in order to prevent, in order to prevent the Japanese from using these boats, from using these boats for any future invasion of East India, of East India. Right? Now, the region of undivided Bengal in a very large measure is covered by the Ganga Brahmaputra delta. It is the largest delta in the entire world, and as is the case in almost all deltas, the distributaries of the main rivers often result in the formation of many small riverine islands. And for the people living in these islands, inter-island transport is a crucial way in order to ensure that they are getting all the necessary supplies, right? If you remove their ability to hop from one island to the other, or if you disrupt the lines of communication between these different islands, then these communities become stranded. And the British had already taken away all their surplus food. By doing this, by seizing their boats also, they virtually stranded them on these islands without any food and without any means for obtaining fish, which they were using to supplement their dietary needs. And thus, they were essentially condemning these communities to a future of starvation and death. Right? So, second was this reason. Right? Write down. The island communities of the Sundarbans Delta, of the Sundarbans Delta had been stranded, had been stranded and condemned to a future of starvation and death, to a future of starvation and death. And C likho, C. There was also a great degree of fear. There was also a great degree of fear among the people of Eastern India, among the people of Eastern India, that the British would adopt a scorched earth policy, would adopt a scorched earth policy in Assam and Bengal, in Assam and Bengal, in order to, in order to delay, in order to delay the Japanese invasion of India. The Japanese invasion of India. Give me one moment. Right. There was also great fear in the people of Eastern India that the British would adopt a scorched earth policy in Assam and Bengal in order to delay the Japanese invasion of India. Right. So, due to these reasons, mass unrest was extremely high. Right. So, these are the two first reasons, and then number 3. Write down. As a result of the collapse of the British and French empires, in Southeast Asia, comma, the collapse of the British Indian Empire, also seemed imminent. Full stop. Indians had no faith in the stability of the British Empire, and did not feel that it would be able to defend Indians against Japanese aggression. Did not feel that it would be able to defend Indians against Japanese invasion. Full stop. Public trust in the stability of the government was so low. That the people had even started withdrawing their deposits from banks and post offices, and instead had started converting their wealth into gold and silver. Full stop. As a result of the erosion of public confidence, comma, the masses were bursting with the anticipation of British collapse, and were ready to give expression to their long-standing discontent with British rule. Right? So they felt that the British Empire was on the precipice of collapse, and they wanted to give it the final push over the edge. Right? The masses were ready. And finally, likho number 4. The manner in which the British had retreated from Malay, Singapore, and Java. Sorry, Malay, Singapore, and Burma. Malay, Singapore, and Burma, after being routed by an Asian power, had destroyed the British aura of invincibility. Full stop. The mighty British Empire looked vulnerable, and the Indian masses were emboldened to challenge it directly. Full stop. Further, the British had also left their subjects in these Southeast Asian colonies, to their own defenses, and had given preferential treatment to Europeans over Indians while evacuating. Full stop. Within brackets you can write. Separate white and black roads were created or demarcated for evacuating whites and Indians. Full stop. Close brackets. This exposed the racist tendencies of the British rulers. Full stop. Indians became increasingly certain that the British would not hesitate to repeat their performance when Japan invaded India. Okay? So these were the factors why Mahatma Gandhi chose to launch the Quit India movement. Now, next we have to talk about mass activity and extent of participation. But before that, we should talk about the beginning of the movement and its spread. Give the subheading: beginning and spread of the movement. Write down point number 1. The Quit India movement was officially launched on the 8th of August 1942 when the All India Congress Committee endorsed the Quit India resolution. Endorsed the Quit India resolution at its meeting, or in its meeting at the Golia Tank Maidan, in Bombay. In Bombay. Full stop. The Congress resolved to. So, what were the elements of the Quit India resolution? The Congress resolved to A, B, C, D. A. Demand an immediate end. Of British rule in India. Demand an immediate end of British rule in India. Full stop. B. Declare commitment to free India. Declare commitment of free India to defend itself against all types of fascism and imperialism. That means against both British imperialism as well as Japanese fascism. Declare commitment of free India to defend itself against all types of fascism and imperialism. C. Form a provisional government. After British withdrawal. D. Sanction a mass movement of civil disobedience. Against British rule. And E. Name Mahatma Gandhi as the leader of the struggle. तो क्या क्या डिमांड किया है कांग्रेस ने, क्या क्या रेजोल्यूशन लिया है? टू डिमांड complete independence, to declare the commitment of free India, to defend itself, to declare the intent to form a provisional government after British withdrawal, to sanction a mass movement of civil disobedience against British rule, and finally to name Gandhiji as the leader of this struggle. Okay? So this is what the All India Congress Committee resolved on the 8th of August 1942. Next main point लिखो. Mahatma Gandhi followed the resolution by directly addressing the masses, and while he urged the masses to remain non-violent, he also gave the masses the mantra of this new phase of struggle. The mantra of this new phase of struggle. Full stop. He said, within quotes, I give to you a mantra, a mantra. It is a short one. It is a short one. Full stop. You may imprint it on your hearts and give expression to it with every breath. Full stop. The mantra is do or die. The mantra is do or die. Full stop. We will either free India or die in the attempt. Full stop. We shall not live to see the perpetuation of our slavery. Full stop. Next point. He also issued general instructions to different sections of the population. Full stop. To the peasants, sub-points. To the peasants, he said, if zamindars are anti-government, pay mutually agreed rent. And if zamindars are pro-government, do not pay rent. Full stop. Next point. Workers, colon. इसके बाद इस तरह से workers, colon. If factory owners are anti-government, do not strike. But if they are pro-government, go on strike. Students, if confident, leave studies and join the struggle. Next subpoint. Government employees, do not resign, but declare your allegiance to the Congress. Princes, support the masses and accept the sovereignty of your people. Next point. Masses of the princely states, support your ruler, support your ruler only if he is anti-government, and declare yourselves to be part of the Indian nation, to be part of the Indian nation, and declare yourselves to be part of the Indian nation. साथ में soldiers, क्या बोला? Do not leave the army, do not leave the army, but don't fire on your compatriots, but don't fire on your compatriots. ठीक है? Write down further. Next point, next main point. While Mahatma Gandhi urged the masses to remain non-violent, comma, he seemed to be in a much more radical mood. He seemed to be in a much more radical mood as compared to earlier. Full stop. In the build up towards the Quit India movement, comma, Mahatma Gandhi had anticipated that the movement would be extremely violent, Stop. In a series of articles and interviews, comma, he had clarified his position on non-violence. So he knew that the movement is going to be an extremely violent one from the very beginning, and thus he had tried to redefine the parameters of non-violence, right? He had clarified his position on non-violence. Subpoint. He explained that violence was acceptable in certain circumstances, such as immediate bodily defense against a murderer or rapist. Full stop. Next subpoint. He further explained that the British would be directly responsible for any Indian violence, since violence by Indians would only be in response to British aggression and violence, right? So it would not be violence which was premeditated by Indians, but it would be a response to British violence. It would be an answer to British violence. It would be the Indians expressing their right of self-defense against a violent and oppressive colonial power, right? So he also explained that violence by Indians would only be in response to British aggression and violence. Next point. He also assured the masses, he also assured the masses that he would not waver in his support to their struggle, in his support for their struggle, in his support for their struggle, even if, even if there is large scale outbreak of violence, there is large scale outbreak of violence, and asked the masses, and asked the masses to act in accordance with, to act in accordance with their conscience, their conscience, right? So a British journalist, Fisher, had gone to interview Mahatma Gandhi, and the interviewer had expressed concerns about the impending cycle of violence, especially in the villages. So Mahatma Gandhi had started by saying that the peasants are going to first not pay taxes, and then they are going to seize the lands, and then Fisher has expressed concerns, but this is going to lead to violence. So Mahatma Gandhi had sarcastically said, not necessarily. Fisher had asked him, how are you going to ensure that violence does not break out? By appealing to the zamindars. Fisher ne pucha, appealing to the zamindars to do what? To remain non-violent? No, by he said, Mahatma Gandhi replied, by asking them to cooperate with the farmers. So how to cooperate with the farmers? By running away. So Mahatma Gandhi from the very beginning had appeared to be in a very radical and almost militant mood with regards to the question of violence. By this point of time, it had become clear that the movement is going to be extremely violent. The government is going to use all the means at its disposal to suppress the violence, suppress the movement, and the Indians will have no choice but to respond in kind. So it is going to result in a complete cycle of violence, and Mahatma Gandhi was ready to accept this. This was a matter of survival for the Indians. This was the time to either do or die for Indians. Mahatma Gandhi was also certain that even if he gave the call for non-violence and decided to withdraw the Quit India movement if violence breaks out, like he had done in 1922 with regards to the non-cooperation movement, the masses were not in the mood to listen this time around, right? The quantum of their energy, their unrest was so high that the masses would be acting out of their own volition. And in such a scenario, the Congress and Mahatma Gandhi himself would lose all kinds of control over the people, right? And if Mahatma Gandhi came out in complete opposition of the movement, if violence breaks out, this would do more harm to the Congress than benefit it, right? Earlier, Mahatma Gandhi had withdrawn the non-cooperation movement after the outbreak of violence because he was concerned that the British are going to use the violence of Indians in order to suppress the movement, and the masses are going to suffer. And this may result in the disappearance of support towards the mass movement and the national project. But this time around, the masses themselves were so energetic that there was no need for the Congress leadership to rein them in. Mahatma Gandhi understood that even without constant pushing of the Congress, without the constant propaganda machinery of the Congress to draw out support, the masses were going to themselves sustain the movement. So there was no question of the masses withdrawing or the mass support towards the movement falling down following British repression. And thus, the movement turned out to be an extremely violent one. Right? Next main point likho. Following the do or die speech, comma, the movement had started officially. The movement had started officially. Give me a moment. Right. So, क्या लिखा था आपने? Following the do or die speech, the movement had officially started. Full stop. Next point. The government was not willing to let the movement take off. Movement take off. And thus, early in the morning of 9th August 1942, Gandhi ji, along with all top Congress leaders, were arrested. Full stop. The movement was rendered leaderless. And the government expected that this would prevent the Quit India movement from taking root. Next point. However, contrary to British expectations, the sudden arrest of the Congress leaders resulted in a massive outpouring of public sympathy. And spontaneous protests erupted in all major cities, including Bombay, Pune, Surat, Ahmedabad, Lahore, Multan, Delhi, Lucknow, Patna, Calcutta, Madras, etc. Full stop. Next point. Without the guidance of the leadership, comma, the spontaneous movement of the people took unique forms as the masses began attacking All symbols of the British regime. All symbols of the British regime. Full stop. Next point. At Patna, comma, students led a flag agitation. Students led a flag agitation and were shot at when they tried to raise the Indian tricolor atop the Patna Secretariat. Atop the Patna Secretariat, resulting in the deaths of 11 school children on the 11th of August. Sorry, 7 school children on the 11th of August, 1942. 7 school children on the 11th of August, 1942. Full stop. Following this, the movement became extremely violent. And spread to the villages of Bihar, UP, Bengal, Odisha, CP, and Maharashtra. It remained out of control. For several months. And in vast areas, British authority virtually disappeared. Full stop. Next main point. The army was called in, resulting in more than 90,000 arrests. And over 22,000 deaths. Full stop. Next point. Mass activity almost came to an end by early 1943. But the movement continued through the organization of underground activity. Mass activity came to an end by early 1943, but the movement continued through the organization of underground activity. Full stop. Subpoint. Leaders such as Jay Prakash Narayan, Ram Manohar Lohia, Aruna Asaf Ali, Usha Mehta, etc., emerged as leaders of the underground movement. In the forests of in the forests of Nepal, UP and Bihar. JP Narayan organized a guerrilla outfit named the Azad Dasta. Named the Azad Dasta. Full stop. It made bombs, blasted bridges, disrupted communications, toppled telegraph poles, and broke prisons. And broke prisons. Full stop. Similar activities were undertaken in North India by Ram Manohar Lohia, assisted by Aruna Asaf Ali. Next sub point. Usha Mehta operated a secret Congress radio for several months with the assistance of other nationalists before she was discovered and arrested. Full stop. Next main point. The nationalists also succeeded in establishing parallel governments on a temporary basis after the collapse of British administration in some areas. Subpoint. At Balia, it was organized under Chittu Pandey. And lasted for a week. At Tamluk, present day West Bengal. A parallel government was organized under Suman Sarkar. Full stop. Lasting for almost 2 years. lasting for almost 2 years, comma, it undertook cyclone relief work, cyclone relief work, comma, constructed and funded schools, comma, distributed paddy, distributed paddy among the poor after confiscating it from the rich, after confiscating it from the rich, and organized armed bands, armed bands known as Vidyut Bahinis, armed bands known as Vidyut Bahinis, to both maintain law and order, both maintained law and order, and to resist, and to resist British rule. Next, number 3, at Satara, at Satara, a parallel government known as the Prati Sarkar, a parallel government known as the Prati Sarkar was organized under leaders such as Y.B. Chavan and Nana Patil, under leaders such as Y.B. Chavan and Nana Patil. Full stop. It lasted for 2 years. It lasted for 2 years and organized village libraries, village libraries, comma, arbitration courts known as Nyaya Mandals, to organize village libraries, arbitration courts, comma, prohibition drives, that means prohibition of alcohol, prohibition drives, and Gandhi marriages, Gandhi marriages without dowry. क्या क्या करवाया? Village libraries, न्याय मंडल्स, prohibition drives, and Gandhi marriages. Right? So these were the various kinds of activities that were going on during the Quit India movement. Next subheading, mass activity and extent of participation. Mass activity and extent of participation. Write down. The masses emerged as the strength of the movement. Full stop. The leaders had been arrested and communication between the leadership and the masses was prevented. Was prevented. Full stop. In such a scenario, the masses acted spontaneously to resist British rule and made the independence of India their immediate objective. ठीक है? Next point. Different sections of the population participated in different ways. Participated in different ways. Businessmen provided active support through donations, shelter, and material help. Students acted as couriers for revolutionaries. Simple villagers uh, resisted the British by refusing them information. Locomotive pilots, that is train drivers, participated by transporting revolutionaries and bombs along with other material. Government officials including the police passed on secret information to activists. Women participated both in the open and underground movements. Muslims did not participate directly. Why? Because Jinnah had given the call for Muslims to cooperate with British rule and condemned the Quit India movement, asked them to boycott it. And thus, Muslims did not participate directly in large numbers, but they still participated by sheltering the other activists and revolutionaries. Did not participate directly, but helped by giving shelter to underground activists. Right? Full stop. There were no communal clashes. during the Quit India movement. During the Quit India movement. Next up point. Peasants participated by attacking symbols of British authority, such as such as government buildings, government buildings, police thanas, police thanas, railway tracks, railway tracks, post offices, law courts, etc. Okay. What was unique that there was no anti-zamindar activity throughout the Quit India movement. That means the peasants had decided to attack the British only. They did not attack the zamindars. Write down. Surprising was the lack of any anti-zamindar activity. Any anti-zamindar activity. Full stop. Next point. While the communists had condemned the Quit India movement. Why? Because of the Moscow connection. While the communists had condemned the Quit India movement, they were unable to resist. They were unable to resist the pull off. The pull off. The strong anti-imperialist movement. The strong anti-imperialist struggle. Right? So this was mass activity and the extent of mass participation. किस तरह की एक्टिविटीज देखी हमने? Direct confrontation against British authority, the popular attack on symbols of British authority, and the participation of different sections of the population who were ready to sacrifice their own interests in the cause of the greater nationalist objective of immediate independence. Right. So these are the things that we witnessed. While the masses participated enthusiastically, the movement did not receive complete and unanimous political support. Opposition to the Quit India movement. Write down. The Quit India movement was unable to elicit the support of many political parties. Full stop. The Hindu Mahasabha opposed the Quit India movement. Since it was a Congress-led movement, which which was considered by the Mahasabha to be a minority appeaser, to be a minority appeaser. Further, the decision, the decision to the decision to oppose the movement was also based on the grounds of practical politics. ठीक है कैसे? In Bengal, following the resignation of the Congress ministries, the All India Muslim League had created a government along with the Krishak Praja Party leadership, and it had even been successful in attracting the support of the Hindu Mahasabha. Right? Hindu Mahasabha felt that the presence of its ministers in the Muslim League's cabinet would allow it to protect the interests of Hindus in the Muslim majority province of Bengal. Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was made the Home Minister of Bengal, and he used his position as Home Minister to suppress the Congress-led Quit India movement because he felt that it was against the interests of the Hindu Mahasabha, which was in government, and also against the interests of the Muslims of Bengal. Right? So, All India Hindu Mahasabha opposed it because it was a Congress-led movement which was considered by the Mahasabha to be a minority appeaser. Further, the decision to oppose the Quit India movement was based on the grounds of practical politics. Sub point likho. In Bengal, comma, the Hindu Mahasabha had joined the Muslim League's cabinet, with Dr. S.P. Mukherjee as Home Minister. He used this position to suppress the Quit India movement, since he felt that it threatened the interests of Hindus in the Muslim majority province of Bengal. Next, the All India Muslim League also opposed the Quit India movement. Jinnah condemned the Congress policy of launching a mass movement against the British at a time when Britain was fighting for survival. The Muslim League gave the call for Muslims to support the British war effort and Muslims joined the army in large numbers. Muslims joined the army in large numbers. Full stop. Following the resignation of the Congress, the Muslim League also came in control of the Muslim majority provinces of Assam, Bengal, Sindh, Punjab, and the NWFT. Full stop. It did not want to lose control in these provinces. Since the League's rule of these provinces was considered essential to legitimize its two nation theory. Finally, Jinnah felt that the immediate transfer of power was not in the interests of Muslims. Full stop. Instead, India should be partitioned first. And only then become independent. And what would happen if the British were to quit India suddenly? The partition would get delayed and may not happen at all. So Jinnah did not want this. He wanted the British to continue ruling India and finally partition India before leaving it. Next point likho. The Communist Party of India opposed the Quit India movement. Since it did not want any struggle against a Soviet ally during the Second World War. The All India Kisan Sabha also opposed the Quit India movement. Since its leaders, its leaders felt that the Congress was a zamindar sympathizer. The Congress was a zamindar sympathizer. The majority of the Indian princes, the majority of the Indian princes also strongly opposed the Quit India movement. Full stop. They feared the loss of their sovereignty. They feared the loss of their sovereignty following the collapse of British paramountcy. Following the collapse of British paramountcy. Full stop. Thus, they actively supported the British. They actively supported the British by providing them military and material help. By providing them military and material help. Full stop. They also actively cooperated with the British to suppress the Quit India movement. To suppress the Quit India movement. So this was the mass activity and extent of mass participation, right? Along with the various groups which oppose the Quit India movement. Now, finally, we need to talk about the impact or significance of the Quit India movement. Right. Firstly, the movement had displayed that the question of independence was a relevant question not only for the nationalist leadership but also for the masses themselves. The masses had by this point of time become fully committed to the idea of complete independence. And they were ready to go to extreme lengths to attain it. They were ready to risk life and limb in order to attain it. So masses became fully committed to the idea of complete independence and they were ready to go to extreme lengths to attain it. Next point likho. This demonstrated the rising radicalism of the Indian national movement. This demonstrated the rising radicalism of the Indian national movement and signaled that the British could not depend upon any cooperation from the ordinary Indians in the future. Thus, there was only one option for the British, that is to quit India. Write down. Thus, the only option for the British, thus the only option for the British was to quit India. Was to quit India. Second लिखो. The British government employees, the British government employees had also actively supported the movement and it had become clear that they had now switched their allegiance from the British rule towards the Indian people. And this was the final nail in the coffin of the British Raj. Why was this? Because the apparatus of the civil service and its bureaucracy was the basis on which the British were controlling India. Now, since this machinery had become unruly and was out of control, the British had no option but to leave India. So, the end of British rule was now a certainty. It was no longer a question of if the national movement is going to succeed, if India is going to become independent. It was simply a matter of when it would become independent. Right now? So, it made the end of British rule a certainty, and the next agenda for the British became the transfer of power. British could now clearly see the writing on the wall that they would have to leave India, and that too at the earliest possible, and thus the transfer of power became the next agenda, deciding the terms on which the British would transfer power, to whom power would be transferred, how that power would be exercised, among whom shall it be divided. अब ये वाले क्वेश्चन ज्यादा रेलेवेंट हो जाएंगे. Thirdly, the armed forces which since 1857 had not participated in the national movement now started becoming infected with nationalism. The armed forces also began displaying the symptoms of nationalism and the anti and anti-imperialism. Right? We see this both within the British Indian forces proper and also outside them. Right? The establishment of the Indian National Army, its lengthy campaign in Burma and the northeast frontier, the establishment of the Indian National Army, its lengthy campaign in Burma and the and the northeast frontier, the following INA trials, and the Royal Indian Naval Mutiny of February 1946 were the direct results of the Quit India movement. Were the direct results of the Quit India movement, right? And this was especially alarming to the British. Firstly, because the war was going on, and if the British were not in a position to trust the army, then their fortunes in the war may also be threatened. And secondly, because till now it was the army and the armed might of Britain that had played a very important role in the perpetuation of British rule. Since the British could no longer rely on the loyalty of the army, this had created a crisis situation, and it was the reason for the great degree of urgency that the British administration would display in the future with regards to the question of transfer of power. Write down. This played an important role in inducing an unprecedented level of urgency among the British with respect or with regards to the question of transfer of power. With regards to the question of transfer of power. ठीक है? So this is another important significance. कैसे दिखता है urgency? The movement finally came to an end with the release of Mahatma Gandhi in May of 1944, and by 1945 all the parallel governments had also been dissolved. So 1944-45 में ये खत्म हो जाएगा. This is going to be followed by the Wavell Plan, the Breakdown Plan, the Cabinet Mission Plan, the Balkan Plan, and finally the Mountbatten Plan within a space of 2 years. What the British had not been ready to grant to Indians in 200 years, they were now desperate to give to Indians and quickly extract themselves from India. Next लिखो. Number 4. The Quit India movement also changed the fortunes of the Muslim League. कैसे? It came in control of all Muslim majority provinces, and in these provinces it generated a great degree of popularity by taking by introducing certain policies which were overtly in the interests of Muslims in all the Muslim majority provinces, and gained immense popularity among Indian Muslims to its policies. Okay. So the effect that 28 months of Congress rule had with respect to rising popularity of the Congress was also experienced by the Muslim League from 1942 onwards. Right. So in 1943, March 23rd, 1943, it celebrated the Pakistan Day. And for the Indian Muslims, now it was a very clear equation. Right. If you support Muslim League, you will get Pakistan and you will get the kinds of policies multiplied many times over that the Muslim League had introduced in the Muslim majority provinces, which were in the interests of ordinary Muslims, right? So it changed the fortunes of the All India Muslim League, and now the Muslim League came on par with the Congress, right? So any future negotiations with regards to the terms under which transfer of power would be carried on could not be finalized without the approval of the Muslim League. So this 2-year Muslim League rule had given it a virtual veto, and this veto was, or this position was also reflected in the elections which took place, right? In 1945-46, in the 11 British Indian provinces, elections were organized, and in all the Muslim majority provinces, the Muslim League gained a clear majority, while the Congress gained a clear majority in all the Hindu majority provinces. And this legitimized the League's position that, firstly, it was the sole representative of all Indian Muslims, since Indian Muslims had voted for it in all the Muslim majority provinces, and secondly, that India was not a single nation but it was two separate nations. And since the Muslim League was representing the Muslim nation, its demand of a separate state of Pakistan was a legitimate one, right? So these are the new questions that are going to emerge, right? Because the fortunes of the All India Muslim League had changed and the Muslim League had come on par with the Congress, following the Quit India movement, a constitutional deadlock or a constitutional crisis would emerge between the Congress and the Muslim League. And while both Indian as well as the British Indians as well as the British would try to resolve this constitutional deadlock, it would not be resolved till the very end, resulting in the ultimate partition of India along with independence. Write down. Next point. So the All India Muslim League came on par with the Congress, and in the future, any discussion, any discussion regarding transfer of power, regarding transfer of power and setting up the constitutional arrangement for free India, for free India would not take place without the league's approval. Without the league's approval. Full stop. Next main point. As a result, a constitutional deadlock had emerged between the Congress and Muslim League. As a result, a constitutional deadlock had emerged between the Congress and Muslim League. Full stop. The failure to resolve this deadlock, ultimately resulted in the partition of India along with independence. Okay. So this is the significance or impact of the Quit India movement. We have seen how the masses had become fully committed to the idea of complete independence, and the British understood that they would have to leave India because they could no longer rely on the cooperation of the masses. The government employees had also switched their allegiance, and transfer of power became the only option. The most alarming development was the emergence of nationalist and anti-imperialist trends within the armed forces, and this resulted in the inducement of a new and unprecedented sense of urgency among the British with regards to the question of transfer of power. And the Quit India movement gave a great degree of unintended benefits to the Muslim League. It was able to cement its position as the sole representative of Indian Muslims, and it resulted in the emergence of a constitutional deadlock, which would finally result in the partition of India along with independence. So the Quit India movement not only made independence a foregone conclusion, reality that could not be avoided. It also made partition a very likely outcome of the transfer of power, right? And herein lies the significance of the Quit India movement, right? Next, we have to talk about this constitutional deadlock and the attempt that were made by the British and the Indians in order to resolve it, leading to the partition of India along with independence. This we are going to talk about in our next lecture. All right. I hope that you found the lecture useful. Thank you for your time. I'll see you guys in our